The head of the UN's nuclear watchdog says there's opportunity for dialogue with Iran over its nuclear program. Mohammed al-Baradei is encouraged by the US intelligence estimate report, which says Iran stopped trying to develop a nuclear weapon in 2003. But the US says the reports are warning to keep the pressure on Iran, while President Mohammed Ahmadinejad says it's a great victory for his country. Al-Jazeera News Dec has more now from Tehran.
Feeling vindicated and still determined as ever, President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad described the US intelligence report as a victory over the world powers.
The report from the United States intelligence agencies was apparently aimed at solving the US government's problems and determined to help the US government get out of the impasse which it is trapped in now. But in reality, the report was a declaration of victory for the Iranian nation.
But while the president basks in this so-called victory, many Iranians say they aren't so sure the report's findings are really something to celebrate.
Is it going to make a distance between Iran's government and other countries like US and European? I think no, it's not kind of victory. I think it's a failure.
The most important issue is the economic problems. Most of the people have problems with their finances, and you see that prices are rising every day. I doubt that this good news will make people so happy that actually overshadows their other problems.
And these mixed feelings travel all the way up Iranian society. It is obvious that the majority of Iranians believe that possessing an independent nuclear technology is a major achievement for the Iranian nation and for their government. But the people are also facing day-to-day problems caused by the economic policies of the government, and that has made them suffer to make ends meet. Nureddin Pirmoazen is the spokesman of Iranian parliament's reformist faction. He insists that in the long term this vindication won't help Ahmadinejad's waning popularity.
If there is a free and healthy election in Iran, the current excitement will pass and have no determining effect on the formation of the next parliament, because people have felt the inflation and shattered economic management that is the result of this government's creating political tension.
And in the end, it's these daily problems which Ahmadinejad will have to focus on now. He may see the report as a victory, but his greatest battle, the one at home, is yet to come. Al-Jazeera News Dec, Al-Jazeera, Tehran.
A bomb in central Baghdad has killed at least 16 people and injured another 28. The attack came as US Defense Secretary Robert Gates made an unannounced visit to the capital. A plume of smoke from the blast could be seen across the city. It happened near Baghdad's Green Zone, where Gates was holding his news conference. Our correspondent John Cookson is in the Iraqi capital.
Well, Mr. Gates arrived in Iraq today. It's his 6th visit since he took office. He flew into the newly reopened Mosul airport. It hasn't been open for 14 years, but now it's open because of the improved security situation. Here in Baghdad, he gave a press conference ahead of the meeting with Mr. Maliki, the Iraqi Prime Minister. He praised the amount of improved security in this country, where casualties in the last few months have fallen by 50%.
As you know, there has been recent months a dramatic change in the security situation across the nation, a decline in violence to levels not seen since the Samarra mosque bombing nearly 2 years ago. However, much remains to be done. Iraqis who have chosen the fight against al-Qaeda need to be integrated into Iraq's security forces or provided other job opportunities. More than ever, I believe that the goal of a secure, stable, and democratic Iraq is within reach.
Meanwhile, it's been another bloody day of violence here in Iraq. At least 600 Iraqis are still dying every month. Today, up in the north of Iraq, a number of Iraqis died in 3 explosions, including at Kirkuk and Bakuba, where 5 people died. And then earlier in Baghdad, a massive car bomb in the Karada district, a Shia district of Baghdad, claimed a number of lives and dozens of injured. John Cookson, Al Jazeera, Baghdad.
In Afghanistan's capital, Kabul, a car packed with explosives rammed into a minibus carrying Afghan soldiers. At least 13 people were killed. 7 of the dead were identified as civilians. Elsewhere, Afghan forces say they've killed 10 Taliban fighters during clashes in the southern Zabul province. Our correspondent Nazanin Mashiri reports.
The mangled remains of a suicide bomber's car. It was full of explosives when it rammed into a minibus carrying Afghan soldiers. It was rush hour in southern Kabul, the road full of shopkeepers and commuters. This, the remains of one of the many shops caught up in this suicide attack. People here were gathering to go to school, they were opening their shops. Once again, it's the Afghan civilians who get caught up in these kinds of attacks. The Taliban's claimed responsibility and told Al Jazeera the bombing was a message to all Americans and their supporters. They apologise for the deaths of the civilians, a message rejected by this man whose cousin was killed.
They are not Muslims. This action is not allowed in Islam, and this was inhuman. What had these innocent children, shopkeepers and ordinary people done wrong who just died? They had come out of their homes to find food for their families.
It's the fourth time national forces have been targeted in the past few months.
The fear that the National Army has created in the hearts of the enemy forces has made them the first target. And it shows the National Army is such an able and perfect force that the enemy feels endangered by it.
Al Jazeera has obtained a map used by UN staff that shows the change in conditions on the ground over the past 2 years. Back in 2005, the areas in orange, categorised as high risk, weren't that substantial. As you can see in this up-to-date map, almost half of Afghanistan's now shaded in. Nearly all of the south and east of the country categorised as high and extreme risk. American Defence Secretary Robert Gates left the country just hours before this latest bombing. He was here to discuss the escalating violence with Afghan President Hamid Karzai. There's a sense among many here that the Afghan government and international forces aren't doing enough. This has been the worst year in terms of violence here in Afghanistan since the fall of the Taliban. Many Afghans are now fearful about what 2008 will bring them. What message do you have for them?
I have been concerned about the fact that there has been a growing level of violence here in Afghanistan over the last couple of years. But the message, the consistent message that I heard today was from both American and Afghan military leaders, as well as other military leaders in ISAF, was that an important reason for the increased violence is because there is a much more aggressive effort on the part of ISAF to go after the Taliban and to go into areas where they had not been active before.
His answer may not be good enough for Afghans once again frustrated at the lack of progress towards peace. Nazanin Bashiri, Al Jazeera, Kabul.
Israeli troops have shot dead a member of the Palestinian security forces in the West Bank town of Bethlehem. Palestinian officials said an Israeli military convoy drove into the town and opened fire on the security forces when they tried to stop and inspect a null vehicle. The Israeli army has so far not commented on the incident. Construction of new Jewish settlements on Palestinian-occupied territories was supposed to stop immediately. It was part of Israel's commitment to restarting peace efforts after the Annapolis conference. But that commitment is now being questioned with news that more than 300 new homes have been approved for a site on contested land in East Jerusalem. David Chater has more.
Only days before construction began on Jabal Abu Ghanaim, the Israeli Prime Minister at the time, Benjamin Netanyahu, said the battle for Jerusalem has begun. Har Homar is now once again on the front line of that battle. The green light has been given to construct more than 300 new homes here just 1 week after Israel promised to freeze all settlement activity.
The Palestinian negotiating team who attended the Annapolis peace conference called it a grave violation of all the agreements and understandings that were reached. An urgent letter has been sent to the US Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice asking her to block the move.
Whenever there is a hope for any peace or any better future, always they made some measures which destroy everything.
Palestinians mounted a series of protests a decade ago to try and stop the building of Har Homar. Rising on land east of the Green Line, occupied in the 1967 war, they contend it's an illegal settlement under international law.